Hello and welcome to an overview of the HousePoint spreadsheet. This is a tool designed to be the hub or the central focal point of an entire house system. Not only will this allow you to look at house points, behaviour points and detentions from your students, but also has many other features such as league tables, overall results, events and much more. Let's get into it. I think the best way for me to show you the capabilities and functionality of this tool is to give you a demonstration as if it was set up already for a school in progress. So here you can see we've got several different buttons we can click on to access different information. At the top here we've got 4 houses, beech, cedar, elm and oak, and then a 5th button for 6th form. In this particular case we have 4 houses, but 6th form are in mixed houses, so it's easier to have them as a separate kind of entity. Let's start by assuming the role of a tutor. I'm going to be a tutor for Beech House. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the button for Beech. That's taken us to a dashboard specifically for this house. And on the right here you can see the tutor groups in rank order based solely on house points. It's important to have your competition that is based only on the positive aspects of students. That way any poor behaviour, the behaviour points or any negative implications from other students won't actually affect the efforts and results of other students. So here you can see that 7 Lambda in this house are at the top with 1269 house points. Now these numbers have actually been adjusted to keep things fair. So in 7 Lambda, let's say they had 20 students, and in 8 Delta, let's say they had 30 students, then of course 8 Delta are going to be getting more house points overall, you would expect. So the numbers wherever it's next to a group have actually been adjusted to account for the difference in the numbers within that group. And then on the furthest right hand side you can see a football league style movement, so how 8 Delta have climbed 4 places since the date shown above. So then what you can do on the left hand side is you have buttons for each of the different tutor groups, and you can click on these to take you to specific information for that group. Here we've clicked on one of the groups and you can see the overall information in a mini dashboard for that particular tutor group. And starting at the top you can see there is a tutor score out of 100. This particular group has got 64, which is being rated as a good average and therefore has highlighted as green. Now this score is based on how this particular tutor group rates between all of the other tutor groups in the school. So whichever tutor group has the most house points would be at the top, and whichever tutor group has the fewest house points would be at the bottom. Do the same equation for behaviour points and detentions. Nice little bit of maths in the background to work out roughly where this group therefore would kind of place as a percentage out of all of those scores. And that would give this group a score of 64%. So you're never comparing this to the maximum, you're comparing it to the current best tutor group. So it does give a kind of overall picture or a bit of a demonstration of where this group lies within the context of a school. Next to that you can see that we have the average house points per student in this group, which happens to be 27, and the average groups for a student within this year group. We clicked on a year 11 group and you can see that it's 13. So this tutor group in particular are achieving remarkably well in terms of house points. Then if you keep moving over to the right you have a bit of a data grab of what's going on. So here you can see 18% of these students have more house points than the average and so on. Underneath all of this you have your actual tutees in a grid. It starts with their rank order and again has got a movement. So student 1 may have gone up 5 places since the last time the movements were reset. Obviously you have the student name, house points they've earned this year and house points they've earned all time. So because we've clicked on a year 11 group, then obviously they've been getting house points since they started year 11 in September, but also they've got all of their points that they've had since year 7 and onwards, or however long they've been in the school. Next to that we have awards, and we've set up 5 different awards: bronze, silver, gold, colours and then captain award, and they're set at different intervals, so 75 points, 200 points and so on, and that's based on the house points from all time. So you can see here the top student with their score of over 700 house points is on their house colours. And those awards can be manipulated on another sheet where you can say what they're called and the amount of points that are needed to actually achieve them. Now on the side of the screen you can actually see the start of the next part. Having scrolled over, you can see the next part of the dashboard here is about their behavior movement. Now this one is a really key tool that tutors can use to have discussions with their tutees and their parents and guardians. Basically, you can reset this movement date and give everybody a clean slate whenever you want, and that can be done for individual tutor groups, or the head of year might want to do it for an entire year, or the head of house might want to do it for the entire house at the beginning of a term or at a set point. But the point is you can reset this to give everyone a clean slate, and then from that point on it tracks whether you're improving your behavior, so getting more house points than behavior points, or your behavior is deteriorating, so getting more behavior points than house points. And if it's staying the same, then it's staying stable. And this is what you can use to have those conversations with tutees. You can give them the pat on the back and say well done if their behavior is improving, or you can intervene when you see that they are deteriorating. But the key here is if you have a student who's given up, they've got so many behavior points and no house points, and they think there's no way back, you can hit reset and give them a target from that point and say it doesn't matter about the past, from this moment on, can you improve? Can you start getting house points? Next to that on the right, we have this year's overall points, so house points, behavior points and detentions. The behavior points and detentions are not used for any competitive element, it's just for tutors to be able to quickly access and see what's going on. And then you've got two buttons at the top to show or hide previous years. And when you click that, you can see what they were doing in year 10, 9, 8 and so on. Obviously, if it's a year 7 group, there won't be any previous data. But this can be really useful to track changes. It might be that a particular student was doing really well in year 7 and 8, but year 9 hit puberty, something happened at home, their behavior points have skyrocketed, their house points have diminished, and you can track how students have done and plan your interventions accordingly. So if we back out of those few windows, just hitting that back button, we'll end up back at the main dashboard. Now underneath all of the houses and the sixth form, and by the way, if you go into any of those houses or the sixth form, it's exactly the same setup, just with information dedicated to those particular groups. But underneath we have our features and our functions, and you can actually see that there's space to add more in the future should we feel there's more functions that we would like to include. The first one here is results. One of the most obvious parts of a house system is the competitive element. And the houses, although they've got friends in different tutor groups and friends in different houses, the houses are ultimately having a in-school competition. And year on year you want to see who's winning and decorate the trophy cabinet and engrave your house shield, or however it might be that you're recognizing the winning houses. We used to have a party at the end of the year for each winning house where students would get an hour off to enjoy a bit of cake and a fizzy drink and celebrate their success. But ultimately the reward should be the pride of winning. So here you can see past results from the years gone by and the scores that were kind of achieved in those different year groups. Also, what's quite important at the top here is you can see how far we are through the year, so students can gauge how long they've got until the competition is over. We have a first, second, third and fourth places with the amount of house points achieved. Again, any points attached to a group like this have been adjusted. So if Beach have 200 students and Oak have 300 students, then those points are adjusted. So these may not tally up entirely with the raw scores that have actually been achieved. Underneath that you have a chart there which shows you which year groups are getting the most house points. We would love to see this being more level across. It does seem to be that as students get older they get fewer and fewer house points, and bearing in mind this is based solely on house points. This does not include behavior points. They're tracked, they're monitored, but it doesn't affect the competition. So in terms of getting house points, you can see the trend for this particular example is older years are getting fewer. You can also see there's a spike in Beach for year 11. Now that might be that one of the tutors is kind of cheating or being a bit too fair or a bit too nice with the points. And obviously this whole system relies on consistency. So this might be an intervention strategy now to go and speak to your year 11 Beach tutors and find out exactly what's going on. And vice versa, if you look at year 9, the Beach tutors are not actually, or Beach tutees are not actually getting as many as the rest of their year group. At the very bottom, you've got extra points that have been added. The top row there is for events. So if Beach won house football, they might get an extra bunch of points for that, and that's tallied and shown there, which has already been added to the places above. And then underneath, you've just got additional points. Now that is if you ever want to add points directly to a house that you can't assign to a student. Say you did a house assembly where the Beach tutor group were so fantastic and wonderful that you felt actually putting 10 house points onto Beach would be something worthwhile rather than assigning that to a student. So there's places where you can add extra points without affecting the awards or the data collection about individual students that we've seen earlier on. If we back out of that and return to the main dashboard, we can explore some of the other functionality that we have within this tool. So we're now going to go ahead and click on the Leagues button. So the Leagues is my attempt to gamify the whole system. It's not just about getting points and a pat on the back and having the well done from your tutors and teachers. It's actually about beating your mates. So who's the top house point scorer in the school and how many places have they climbed since the last update? Are you in the top 2%, 10%, 50% of house point scorers? Now you've got that here for the whole school, but on the left you can actually see you can click on each individual year group and each house. So it may be that you're quite low in your year group. Maybe you don't get as many house points as your friends in your particular year, but in the whole school you still might be in the top 20%. Or in your house you might be in the top 10%. So there's actually so many different ways you can find something positive for your tutees and for your students. So even the worst behaved student, the kid who is always getting behavior points and only gets a few house points, there's always somewhere you can find where you can draw a positive and show them that if they just get 1 or 2 more, they'll climb 10 places, 20 places, they'll be in the top 10%. So it's all about positive reinforcement, positive encouragement. And that's again why all of these leagues and all of the competitive elements of the house system should only be based on the positive contributions. The events button will take you to a page where you can put in all of the data from any house event. So you can add events and remove events, and we've even put in 2 columns here, so you can have standard house events that might take place throughout the year, and then a whole nother set for the specific sports day events, and even sports day itself at the top there. You can see all the old records. And the pages, when you get into them, look a little bit like here on the right, where you can just from a drop down menu select which year group placed where within the event, and it will even bring up the results from previous years should you have put them into the system. Another really cool tool that this file has is the day-to-day checker. This is really quite nifty because what you can do is you can select your house and your tutor group and then select 2 dates. So you might have the date from could be the very first day of the year, and the day to could be the date you're at now, and then you wait a few seconds for it just to calculate, and it will show you all of the students within that group and how their house points and behaviour points have changed. So if they've gained house points or gained behaviour points. Here you can see an example. Student 1 has gained 10 behaviour points between these 2 dates. Now, that might be something you can use to set targets for specific students, or if you're a member of SLT or the higher management in a school, you can go in here and look for specific students and give them those targets. Maybe it's a time where they were on report, for example. As a tutor or a general member of staff, that's how you're going to use this tool, just by clicking through, finding your significant groups and having conversations and interactions with your students. This is a great way to plan interventions, it's a great way to get on top of behaviour issues early and use it as a positive force to encourage good behaviour. You can see how this now has become a data-driven behaviour management strategy. Rather than just talking about behaviour in a general sense, you have an overview from the whole school of how they're behaving, and you can specifically target students to encourage and set them targets. Pitch their friends against each other. Say, if you get 2 more house points, you'll be above your mate. And if you get 3 more house points, you're going to be in the top 12%. And it's these conversations that you can have with students and parents that should, in turn, reflect very positively on the uptake of behaviour within a school. For those members of staff who need even further access to the data and more analysis, we have some buttons in the bottom right hand corner. Now these are the tools that are password protected and offer us more insight into what's going on in the school. So this first one here, which is an icon of a trophy, will actually show you which students have received or earned their rewards, which you could do a quick print out of for, say, house assemblies when you're going to give out the awards. The second icon here, this is where the real power of this tool comes from. This is where we can access data analysis. So the data analysis dashboard here provides us with more buttons to click on that take us to significant groups. So we have access for heads of year to find individual year groups and heads of houses to find their particular house, but we also have information on gender, pupil premium, SEND and all other sorts of significant groups. And at the bottom there we've even got all tutor groups. If we assume the position of a head of learning or a head of year, we can click on that button and then choose our particular year group that we may be interested in. And I'm going to go ahead and select a year 10 group, and that will take us to a data snapshot for them. And here we can see a report which is based on house points, behaviour points and detentions. It gives us today's date and tells us how far we are through the year. And underneath that we just have a raft of information that we can use as a head of learning to really plan our interventions and compare how behaviour is with this group and cohorts that have come before. So initially we have access there on the top left for average house points, behaviour points and detentions, which can give us a real nice overview of how our whole year group might be performing and behaving. Then on the right of that, we have a grid which shows house points, behaviour points and detentions for each of the tutor groups within this particular year. And it ranks them in order and shows the actual scores. Again, the scores have been adjusted for numbers, but this would show to me as a head of learning which tutor groups I need to go and talk to, which ones to celebrate and which ones that might need interventions and more strategy. And underneath that is the score as well, which we saw on the tutor group pages. On the left, this particular box is purple because it actually states that after adjusting for student numbers, Year 10 students are getting on average 2 more house points per student compared to the average of the last 4 years, and that is at this point in the year. Now I know that's a mouthful, it sounds like a lot, but when you break that down, what we're saying is the current Year 10 students are getting more house points than Year 10 have done in the past. Now that's the average Year 10 from the past 4 years, and it's at this point in the year, 28% or wherever we are through the year. So that is a nice indication to show me as head of Year 10 that my students are actually improving in behaviour year on year. Underneath that, it happens to be red, and that says after adjusting for student numbers, Year 10 students are getting 7 more behaviour points per student. So yes, we are getting more house points, but we are also getting a lot more behaviour points. So maybe there's not actually the great success story that I'm talking about. Underneath that, it's the same thing, but it's for detentions. That's actually green because we're getting on average the same house points, same detention, as Year 10 have been getting for the last 4 years. And then finally at the bottom, after adjusting for student numbers, the Year 10 students are generally behaving worse than the average Year 10 group at this point in the year because of their net score. And the net score would be house points minus behaviour points. So generally speaking, what we could gather from this particular example is that maybe more house points are being given, but also so are more behaviour points. On the right, we then have specific target students that have come out from all of this data. So student 57 has had no house points this year. Now we might want to look into why that is. Student 786 has 363 behaviour points. So that would be the most. That would be the student we need to be intervening with and making sure they are on report or they are doing something about that. And then we can see that student 116 is on 8 detentions. And then on the right again, you've got target groups with similar information. And this is available for every single year group. Not only do we have that information available for each year group, but we also have it available for significant groups. If your role in the school is to look after the pupil premium students and be on top of their tracking and their data, then we have a slide dedicated particularly to pupil premium students. Again, it's the same kind of information, but we have an extra element here of target students, because not only do we have the ones who are maybe getting the most detentions or the least house points, but we also have the positive side of things here, so we can really help to progress students' own attitudes towards their behaviour. Hopefully you can see the benefits of having a system like this where the points are not just chucked on your registration system. So what we would do in an open register on Sims is you would right click and add your house points or add an achievement and select the points that are going with that behaviour, and then a report can be run every day and uploaded into this file. The benefit of that is that, of course, Sims can do a lot of these features, but it's very clunky. You've got a lot of things to click on and it's a lot of training. This is a one-stop shop with everything automated and included. As long as it's updated with a report often, once a day or at least a couple of times a week, then this information will be as live as possible, but is very user-friendly. Again, this is not something that you would necessarily give access to students for. That might be a bit too much in terms of data management. So the buttons at the bottom that show us all the data analysis, they are password protected, but students should not necessarily be able to click on different tutor groups and see the points that their friends or enemies are achieving. This is much more of a teacher-led thing to encourage discussion and intervention for tutors. And it starts and ends with the tutor. It's all about how often the tutor engages with their tutor group and shows them this. The groups that are encouraged and supported and shown this on a regular basis, they're the groups that behave better in the school. And the tutors that come in, sit down, tell their kids to shut up and do nothing and don't show them this, they're the ones whose tutor groups or whose tutees are the worst behaved in the school, generally speaking, and that's how it tracks. So it is really important. Consistency is the key, but also sharing the message that it's not just about giving house points as motivation or as dangling carrots. You can't give a student 5 points for stopping to swing on their chair and another student 1 point for doing extra homework. It has to be consistent and it has to be fair, because the data is used in the analysis tracking, what we just saw. How can we say that year 10 are behaving better than the average of the last 4 years if this year suddenly year 10 are being given house points for things that weren't necessarily point worthy before? So that's a really important factor. And again, I have resources, and there'll be another video out shortly, probably on the channel by now hopefully, that shows you what we give house points for and the kind of general rule of thumb for giving out house points. And I think the final thing to show you is for anybody who would be in charge or responsible for updating this file, anybody who would be in charge of setting it up for the new year and doing the daily update. So to do that, down in the bottom corner you've got two buttons, a set of cogs, and you've got the arrows feeding into each other. So to update the file on a daily basis, you would click on the circular arrows. So after you've run your report from Sims for the day's points, all you do is you click on those circular arrows, go to this page, type in the password, and you paste the data into the table below. The trick though, of course, is to clear the table first, because if you have a student join or a student has left you, you might be left with redundant information if it doesn't fill up the whole grid. So to clarify, if you have 1200 students in a school, and then when you do your next update you only have 1100, underneath your 1100 you'll still have that old 100 students that were there that should no longer be there. So to clear the table first is actually really important, and then you can paste in the data from your report with the same headings that are here. It is important to have these headings. And then there's also a button where you can have your additional points. Now that's points you want to add to houses that are not necessarily against individual students. By clicking on the cogs button, that will take you to the settings and the configuration for the tool, and you have access to all sorts of utilities here that you might need: unhiding all the sheets, changing the passwords, setting up those awards and the values of those awards, setting up house events, but also you can access the mapping. And mapping is really important because that's where you assign your house names, tutor group names, criteria for SEND groups. You might have different categories. We have K, C, N, AN, different ones that you can set up there. So mapping what you've put in your data drop, if you like, to things this tool can use. It's really easy to do. You just have to kind of click on a few buttons and a few drop down menus and align what you would like to do. And on the right there you can also see how you can reset the individual tutor groups, the ranks, and all the behavior movements that we spoke about earlier. There is obviously a ton of information there, and it can be information overload. And I'm not suggesting for a second that you need to have a system like this with every single, or all of the bells and whistles that this has, but the general gist is having a data-driven behavior management system can tie in really nicely to a house point system. And having your house point system, or your house system in general, tie in to a central hub or a spreadsheet such as this will really help guide and direct your interventions, and hopefully therefore improve behavior and therefore raise attainment. It does rely on consistency. It does rely on teachers and tutees especially actively engaging with it and giving house points out fairly, mostly showing students what their scores are and encouraging that gamification of it. But hopefully you can see the power this tool has when it comes to data analysis, actually examining the house points year on year and the behavior points year on year, and being able to access that at the click of a few buttons, generating reports. It's a really useful and powerful tool. So thank you very much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next video.